Before you sleep, let me tell you about a group of young women who glowed in the dark. They glowed in their hair, and on their clothes, and on their skin, and some of them thought it was the loveliest thing. They did not yet know that the glow was killing them, and the men who employed them already did. It begins just over 100 years ago, in America, in the years around the First World War. Radium had been discovered only a little while before by Marie Curie and her husband, and the world had fallen completely in love with it. It glowed with a soft, ghostly, greenish light, all on its own, for no reason anyone could see, and that made it seem almost magical. They put it in everything, in toothpaste, in face cream, in tonics you were meant to drink for your health, and they used it to paint the numbers on watches and clocks, so that a soldier in a dark trench or a man waking in the night could see the time glowing faintly in the black. Someone had to paint those tiny, glowing numbers. The work was delicate, so the factories hired young women, some of them barely more than girls, with steady hands and good eyes. It was a wonderful job, by the standards of the time. It paid well, and it came with a kind of magic. The women worked with the glowing paint all day and carried the shimmer of it home on their skin and their dresses. Some of them painted their nails with it, and even their teeth, to surprise their sweethearts in the dark. The papers called them the Ghost Girls, and they thought it was a gift. The paint came on a fine brush, and the bristles would splay apart after a few strokes. To keep the line crisp enough for those tiny numbers, the women were taught a simple trick. They would draw the brush to a point between their lips. Dip, paint, lip, dip, paint, lip. Hundreds of times a day. Thousands. And with every single point, they swallowed a little of the radium. Some of them asked, early on, whether that could possibly be safe. And they were told by the people who employed them that it was perfectly harmless, that if anything, the radium was good for them, that it would put the roses in their cheeks. Here is the cruelty hidden inside that promise. Radium, to the human body, looks almost exactly like calcium. And calcium is the very thing your bones are built from. So with every lick of that brush, the women were not just swallowing a poison. They were swallowing a poison that their own bodies carefully, faithfully carried deep into their bones and locked away, mistaking it for the stuff of life. It settled into their jaws, their teeth, their spines, their hips, and there, lodged in the living bone, it began very quietly to glow and to burn. It took a few years. That was part of the horror of it. The women painted and married and lived their lives and felt perfectly fine. And then, one by one, they began to fall apart. It usually started in the mouth. A tooth would ache and then loosen and then fall out. And the socket where it had been would not heal. It would fester instead and spread. When the dentists went in to help, they found something they had no name for. The jawbone itself was dying. It had gone soft and necrotic and was crumbling away, sometimes coming out in pieces in the dentist's hand. They called it, eventually, radium jaw. And it did not stop at the jaw. The radium in their bones brought a deep anemia, so that they grew pale and weak. It made their bones so brittle that a woman could break her own leg simply by stepping off a curb, or shatter her spine just by sitting down. Tumors grew. They shrank and stooped and ached in every joint. Young women in their 20s were becoming, in the space of a year or two, frail and dying. The papers found a new name for them. They stopped calling them the Ghost Girls. They started calling them the Living Dead. And through all of it, the companies that employed them insisted that the radium had nothing to do with it. This is the part that should make your blood run cold. The men who ran those factories were not ignorant. In the laboratories, the scientists who studied the radium handled it with lead shields and long tongs and thick protective screens because they knew exactly how dangerous it was. They knew, and out on the factory floor, just down the hall, they were handing the very same substance to young women and telling them to put it in their mouths. When the women began to sicken and die, the companies did not stop. They denied that the paint was the cause. They hired their own doctors to examine the women and announce some other, vaguer reason for the illness. In some cases, when a woman died, they let it be whispered that her real disease had been something shameful, smearing her name to protect their product. They leaned on doctors and dentists to stay quiet. They were not confused about what was happening. They were covering it up. It would have stayed buried, the way these things so often do, except that the women refused to stay quiet. In New Jersey, a young woman named Grace Fryer, whose own jaw was dissolving, spent 2 years simply trying to find a lawyer willing to take a case against so powerful a company. At last, she found one, and in 1927, she and 4 others sued. The newspapers called them the case of the 5 women doomed to die. The company's strategy was as cold as everything else it had done. They delayed. They stalled. They asked for postponement after postponement because every one of those 5 women was dying. And the lawyers were betting, quite openly, that if they could only drag it out long enough, the plaintiffs would all be dead before the case ever reached a courtroom, and the problem would solve itself. It very nearly worked. The women were so ill that some of them could barely raise their arms to take the oath. But they held on. They settled, and they won. And a few years later, in Illinois, another group, led by a woman named Donohue, took up the same fight against another radium company. Donohue gave some of her testimony from her own bed, too weak to come to the courtroom, the disease that was killing her plain on her face, for everyone to see. She won too, and she died within months. They did not get much for themselves. Some money, some small measure of justice, arriving far too late to save them. But what they bought, with their dissolving bones and their shortened lives, was enormous. And it belongs to all of us. The case of the Radium Girls helped establish, for the first time, that a worker had the right to take a company to court for an illness the work itself had caused. It forced the creation of safety standards for industries handling dangerous materials. The quiet protections that keep workers safe today, in 100 trades, were paid for, in part, by these women, in a currency of suffering. They turned their own dying into a shield for everyone who would come after them. And here is the last, strange, haunting thing. Radium does not burn out quickly. Its glow fades so slowly that, for human purposes, it is almost forever. The half-life of radium is 1,600 years, which means that the radium those women carried into their bones is still there, in their graves, still glowing faintly in the dark, exactly as it did on their skin all those years ago. If you held the right instrument over the quiet earth where they are buried, it would still register them, still humming, still alight. They will go on glowing softly underground for centuries, long after everyone who knew their names is gone. Anyone who has watched a body fail knows that the cruelest harms are often the slow, invisible ones, the ones that are already finished before the first symptom ever shows. The Radium Girls were betrayed twice. Once by an invisible poison they were promised was a gift, and once by the men who knew and watched and said nothing. What they did with that betrayal, the refusing, the suing, the dying in the witness chair so the next girl would be spared, is one of the bravest things in the whole long history of ordinary people. So tonight, As you settle into the dark, spare a thought for the ghost girls, for the steady young hands and the tiny glowing numbers, and the brush drawn again and again to a point between their lips. And be grateful for the quiet, unseen protections they bled to win for you. They are still down there, glowing softly in the dark, resting at last. Rest easy. I'll see you in the small hours.